The most striking thing about Liberty Street Station is not that it was built in 1923. It is that it looks exactly the same today. Mosaic tile still lines the walls. The vaulted concrete ceiling still rises 15 feet above where the rails were supposed to go. The island platform is still there, wide enough for thousands of passengers, empty and silent under fluorescent light. Except for one detail. Bolted to the far wall, behind a set of cinder block partitions, are the remnants of a Cold War fallout shelter. Bunk frames, emergency lighting mounts, survival supplies sealed in cans. Someone tried to give this space a second life. That plan was abandoned too. Liberty Street Station has been prepared for two entirely different futures. It has served neither of them. 2 miles beneath Central Parkway, one of Cincinnati's main boulevards, 4 stations like this one sit unchanged. Race Street, Liberty Street, Brighton Place, Lynn Street. Vaulted ceilings, mosaic tile. Platforms built for thousands of daily passengers, structurally sound, largely intact, waiting for nearly 100 years. No train has ever used them. No passenger has ever boarded. The tunnels were finished in 1923, sealed shortly after, and quietly forgotten beneath the traffic of a city that moved on without them. In today's money, Cincinnati spent more than $180 million building a subway that never opened. Not because it collapsed, not because it flooded, but because a sequence of ordinary decisions collided with forces larger than anyone expected. Everything about it was built to succeed. Everything around it guaranteed it wouldn't. This is a story about what happens when a city builds the right thing at the wrong time, and what that single miscalculation costs for the next 100 years. By 1912, Cincinnati had a serious problem. The city had grown to over 360,000 people, the 7th largest in America. But its 222 miles of streetcar track had become the city's own trap. Streetcars shared roads with horse-drawn carriages, early automobiles, and pedestrians. Collisions happened daily. The intersection of 5th and Vine, the heart of downtown Cincinnati, was so congested that crossing it on foot was faster than taking a streetcar across it. City officials hired a Chicago transit planner to find a solution. His proposal was ambitious. A 16-mile rapid transit loop combining underground, at-grade, and elevated rail. The system would run beneath downtown through the bed of an abandoned canal, an old waterway that had been drained and left as an open ditch through the heart of the city since 1877. It was a clever plan. The right-of-way already existed. The canal bed was already excavated. Cincinnati wouldn't need to tear up its own streets. The estimated cost was $12 million. Then, something went wrong before a single shovel entered the ground. Political advisors decided $12 million was too large a number to win a voter referendum. They revised the plan downward to $6 million. Not because of new efficiencies, but because of electoral calculation. The revised plan covered 11 miles instead of 16. Critical connections were deferred to future expansion. Future funding quietly assumed. On April 17, 1917, Cincinnati voters approved the $6 million bond issue by more than 2-1. Newspapers celebrated. Business groups endorsed it. Labor unions backed it. The front page of the Cincinnati Enquirer called it the beginning of the modern city. 11 days earlier, the United States had entered World War I. Construction could not begin during wartime. Materials were commandeered for the war effort. Labor was scarce. The construction sites along the old canal bed sat idle, fenced off, unused, slowly filling with weeds, while the bond sat in city accounts, losing value it would never recover. By the time the war ended in November 1918, the economics of the project had quietly collapsed. The $6 million approved in 1917 could now buy half of what it could before the war. Every construction material, Concrete, steel, electrical cable had roughly doubled in price. The $6 million that should have built 11 miles of rapid transit could now barely cover 7 miles of basic infrastructure. Track, signals, and rolling stock would require additional funding that didn't exist. On January 28, 1920, the first steam shovel broke ground at the intersection of Walnut Street and Central Parkway. After 3 years of delays, Cincinnati's subway was finally under construction. What followed was genuinely impressive. Contractors dug through the old canal bed, pouring concrete-lined twin tunnels with walls 2 feet thick. The vaulted ceilings rose 15 feet above where the rails would go. Every 500 feet, cross passages connected the 2 tunnels for ventilation and emergency access. The concrete was properly mixed. The waterproofing held. They were engineered for permanence, built to outlast the people who built them. 4 underground stations took shape: Race Street, Liberty Street, Brighton Place, and Lynn Street. Island platforms, mosaic tilework, vaulted ceilings drawing inspiration from Boston's early subway. By early 1923, the 2.2-mile underground section was complete, on schedule. Under the post-war chaos that had paralyzed the rest of the project, the tunnels themselves were finished. But standing on the Race Street platform in 1923, you would have seen something that made the engineering achievement almost cruel. The platforms had no rails. The stations were beautiful and completely useless. Finishing what they had started would require $9 to $10 million more, and the city had none of it. 2 miles of perfect tunnel, going nowhere. They had built the shell of a modern city and stopped before installing the future inside it. The Rapid Transit Commission estimated completing the full loop would require an additional $9 to $10 million. They had spent $6 million and built infrastructure that couldn't function without spending $9 million more. The city was running out of patience and about to run out of time. Murray Seasongood had spent years watching Cincinnati City Hall drain the public treasury. The Republican machine that ran the city descended from the legacy of Boss Cox, whose portrait still hung in party offices on Vine Street, treated public funds as political leverage. Contracts awarded to loyalists, budgets padded, oversight avoided. On October 14, 1923, Seasongood stood at a podium in the ballroom of the Sinton Hotel, a downtown Cincinnati landmark 2 blocks from the sealed subway entrance on 4th Street, and delivered what newspapers called the shot heard round the wards. His target was the subway. They tell you at City Hall that they have no money. What I want to know is, what becomes of the money? 2 years later, his reform movement swept the elections. Seasongood became Cincinnati's first mayor under a restructured city government. Incorruptible, fiscally rigorous, and deeply suspicious of the subway project he'd inherited. In January 1929, he dissolved the Rapid Transit Commission and transferred control of the project to his own office. The commissioners cleared their desks at the Transit Commission building on 8th Street and handed over the files. It was, as events would prove, a death sentence, delivered 9 months too early to matter. In October 1929, the New York Stock Exchange collapsed. Photographs from that week show crowds gathering outside the Cincinnati Stock Exchange on 4th Street, 2 blocks from the sealed subway entrance, reading the ticker tape as their savings evaporated. Tax revenues fell. Unemployment surged. Any possibility of raising $9 million for a subway tunnel disappeared. The conversation was over. In 1928, 1 year before the crash, the city had paved Central Parkway directly above the tunnels. Traffic now flowed over them at full speed, cars and streetcars riding the surface while the platforms sat empty underneath. The city sealed the tunnel entrances, locked the station gates, and moved on. The subway beneath Central Parkway became a buried fact. What followed over the next century is a story that does not improve with retelling. It escalates. During World War II, Liberty Street Station was partially converted into an air raid shelter. The same cinder block partitions and bunk frames still visible today. Emergency supplies were stored. Ventilation was tested. Then, engineers determined the tunnels were too vulnerable to flooding. The shelter was abandoned. The city's second use for the tunnels lasted less than a decade. In the 1950s, the city needed a new 52-inch water main routed through the urban core. Engineers realized they could run it directly through the southbound tunnel, saving $300,000 by avoiding a new excavation. The water main was installed. It is still there today. Relocating it alone would now cost an estimated $14 million, more than twice what the entire original subway cost in 1917 dollars. The tunnel built to carry thousands of passengers now carries water. Then came the decision that sealed the tunnel's fate more permanently than any vote or economic collapse. In the 1960s, Interstate 75 was cut through Cincinnati. The construction project destroyed the above-ground portions of the original subway route, the graded right-of-way north of the tunnels that would have connected them to the rest of the city. 3 surface stations were demolished. The highway that replaced them made the tunnel's isolation permanent. Not economically marginal, structurally disconnected. The city's solution to the subway was to build a highway over it. By 2002, the tunnels had been sealed for 74 years. Cincinnati voters were asked to approve a half-cent sales tax to fund a $2.6 billion light rail system that would finally use the existing infrastructure. The campaign used photographs of the original stations, the mosaic tile, the vaulted ceilings, as evidence of what the city had already built and never used. Voters defeated the proposal 2-1. Remember, the subway had been Cincinnati's shorthand for government waste for decades. The campaign that tried to revive it ran directly into the phrase it had created. In 2008, engineers confirmed the tunnels were structurally sound, not deteriorating, not failing, simply unused. The city received 3 options. Maintain the tunnels as is for $2.6 million over 5 years. Fill them with dirt for $19 million, or revive them for transit use for $100 million plus water main relocation. Cincinnati chose the cheapest option: minimal maintenance, continued inaction. In 2024, the city received 18 new proposals: underground art galleries, stormwater management systems, data center cooling facilities, film sets. Each one more creative than the last. Each one sharing the same fundamental problem. Tens of millions in cost, no clear revenue stream, and a city that has lost population every decade since 1970. The proposals were reviewed. None were funded. The tunnels remain exactly as they were when they were sealed. The 4 stations still exist, unchanged since 1923. Liberty Street Station, the one prepared for transit, then for nuclear war, then left as neither, is the most complete. The cinder block partitions are still there. The bunk frames are still there. The mosaic tile is still there. 2 eras of preparation for 2 different futures, preserved together in the same space. At Race Street, the station was designed as the system's hub, with 3 tracks and expansion stubs built into the walls for future connections that never came. The curves beyond the platform are among the tightest in American subway history. A design flaw critics used for years as evidence the system was compromised from the start. At Brighton Place, the tunnel portals are still visible from the highway, concrete arches opening into darkness while cars pass overhead. At Lynn Street, the station is bricked shut, sealed behind layers of concrete. Some entrances are exposed, others are buried. Those who have entered the tunnels describe the acoustics first. Concrete amplifies everything. Footsteps echo for seconds. Voices carry farther than they should. It is the sound of a space built for motion and crowd, but never used for either. The tunnels today carry a water main and fiber optic cables. That is what remains of the vision. The failure of the Cincinnati subway changed the city's trajectory in ways that compound over time. If the system had opened in 1925, Cincinnati would have entered the small group of American cities that built early rapid transit: New York, Boston, Chicago, Philadelphia. Instead, it committed to automobiles. Interstate highways carved through neighborhoods. Suburban flight accelerated. By 1970, Cincinnati had fallen from 7th to 29th largest American city. The long-term urban form reflects a single branching decision made under wartime inflation. But here is what makes this story more than a local, cautionary tale. Every decision that killed the subway was, in isolation, defensible. Lowering the bond to win the vote, reasonable. Proceeding despite post-war inflation, understandable. Season good dissolving the commission, arguably justified. The Great Depression, beyond anyone's control. No single villain, no single catastrophic error. Just a chain of reasonable decisions that collided with historical forces at exactly the wrong moment. The bond vote happened 11 days after America entered the war. Construction began at the peak of post-war inflation. The project ran out of money 2 years before the Depression hit. If any one of those timing failures had been different, the system likely opens. That is what makes the Cincinnati subway so difficult to let go of. It wasn't incompetence that stopped it. It was timing. Brutal, indifferent, precise timing. The tunnels are not haunted by what happened in them. Nothing happened in them. They are haunted by what was supposed to happen. Passengers, trains, a city that grew into its own infrastructure. 2 miles of perfect construction, sealed and waiting, while the city above reorganized itself around roads instead. Every city that built early rapid transit faced obstacles. New York dealt with corruption. Boston navigated engineering failures. Chicago fought political battles for decades. They persevered. Cincinnati stopped, with the tunnels already finished, with the stations already tiled, with the finish line visible. What remains is not an alternate timeline. It is physical evidence of how timing alters outcomes. Liberty Street Station, prepared for transit and for nuclear war, and used for neither, sits unchanged beneath Central Parkway. The city that was supposed to be built above it never arrived. The one that arrived instead drove over it. If this story changed the way you think about timing, infrastructure, or the cost of almost, subscribe. We examine the systems that exceed their limits and the consequences that follow.